Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews, and today we have the Sarcosuchus from Rebor. This is a great day because this is a figure that we've been looking forward to, or at least I know I have, and quite a few others have been looking forward to for quite some time. We already have had the Dinosaurus, which was awesome. We now have the Sarcosuchus, which looks equally as awesome. And you can see the box art here shows both different paint variants of the figures as well as the deceased drowned juvenile Nurosaurus that comes with the Sarcosuchus. And you can see that this is the Licca Deluxe Pack River version and Lake version. And of course, again, pretty much your standard when it comes to the box art that you usually see from Rebor. And then if we turn them around, we take a look at them here on the back and reposition them a little bit because they're not quite centered. A little better. You can see again that we've got the two different paint variants, pretty much the same images honestly here on the back, but of course trying to, flip-flop, because on the gray version we have on the back the red version, and then on the back of the box of the red version you have the gray version, so just basically showing you which ones are available. So let's pop these boxes open and check them out. So here is the Nurosaurus as well as the gray version, and man, these things are quite large, just like the Dinosaurus was. And then we'll bring the camera in a little bit and reposition it. And then the reddish version or like a reddish brown actually, it looked more reddish on the box, but here in person it actually is a lot more of a brown sort of a look with the other version of the Nurosaurus, again the prey for this version of our Sarcosuchus. Get this in the mouth somewhere. It's good enough the way it is for right now. And we'll just reposition them here briefly so we can at least kind of get the two of them here looking at us. And there we go. You can see they both look pretty darn nice, honestly. Again, I don't know if they're as nice as the Dinosaurus. I just feel like the Dinosaurus might have been a little bit nicer, but not by much, if at all. I think it's more or less the paint apps of the one Dinosaurus were just gorgeous. And the paint apps of both of these are really nice, but just something about that kind of greenish version of the Dinosaurus is dream-worthy to me. But these do look really cool. Sculpt-wise, they're phenomenal. Very, very highly detailed, as always. But the paint jobs also look really good. Definitely this one would be my favorite, and I've been pretty much thinking the same thing ever since the images of it were released. This was going to be my favorite. Here in person, I can definitely say that is still the same feeling because the paint apps are just so nice on that. But that's not to take away from this kind of like, it's almost like a grayish green sort of tone that we have for the other ones. Very interesting tone of color, but that one also looks really good. Regardless, honestly, they both look great if you ask me, so let's jump to a closer look at both of these right now. So I think we'll go with the kind of reddish brown, more brown than anything sort of version, which is my favorite version of the two. And we'll look at this one as far as the sculpt goes, and then of course check out the other one as far as the paint apps go. But straight away, when you look at that head sculpt, look at how gorgeous that looks. That is about as lifelike and realistic of a head sculpt for a Sarcosuchus model as you'll probably ever see. It just looks incredible, and honestly, just like with the Dinosaurus, I feel like it looks like a 100% living, breathing, very small version of a Sarcosuchus here in my hands. I feel like I could probably take this up to my wife and my kids and say, look at this cute little baby Sarcosuchus I got. And considering they probably have no idea what a Sarcosuchus is, my son would actually, but my wife and daughter definitely would not. But if I took this up to them, they'd probably yell at me and say, why do you have that in here? It's going to bite us. And they would 100% believe that this is a living, breathing Sarcosuchus. But you can see the fine detail, the scale detail looks really good here on the face. We have some very nice variations of browns, which again, kind of have like a reddish brown sort of a look. But here in person, I think it looks a lot more brown than anything. You can also see some really nice yellowish tones here as you get closer to the jawline. And there's a very nice dark wash that's been applied, which you can see highlighting all of the cracks and crevices of the skin texture. We also have those nice brown spots here in the face, which add even a little more color variation to the Sarcosuchus. You can see the eyes are painted beautifully, very small eyes, also given a brownish tone similar to what we have for a large portion of the body. You can see the scale detail and skin texture looks really good down here on the lower jaw as well. And of course we have that classic Sarcosuchus style snout here as we have that elongated look to it. We do have an articulated jaw, which you can see that worked very nicely. We've got the teeth sculpted out. Every tooth appears to be sculpted individually for the most part, and they all have that very realistic look to them. Again, Rebor uses some form of material that has almost like a slight translucency to it, but just has such a very realistic look to it. Like, I don't know, besides Rebor and Nanmu, I don't think anybody can touch those two companies when it comes to the realism of the teeth on their models. They just look extraordinarily lifelike, and you can see that as you move through the course of the jaw here and the teeth of the Sarcosuchus. You can see the inside of the mouth also is nicely sculpted. We've got some variation of color in there, nice texturing, nice glossy look, but as a whole I think the Sarcosuchus for the most part has a little bit of a satin shine to it, because I guess we're trying to insinuate and replicate the appearance of being kind of wet. You can see the inside of the mouth on the upper side also looks really well done. You can very clearly see where the jaw articulates because there's kind of like a little divot right there, but I don't think that takes away from the figure. And from the side, you know, it looks really good. Just from the above area, you can kind of see that. Once you close the jaw, though, that completely disappears. It really does match perfectly back in. As we move back here into the neck of our Sarcosuchus, you can see some big beefiness there to the throat. You can also see some variations of color here, as we have all sorts of variations of browns, almost like some reddish browns. You have blacks here in there. You also have like slightly lighter variations of browns. We've got a little more of that yellow kind of running down here, and then we transition to the underside where we have this very nice light tone of color. You've got all sorts of variation of sizes to the scales here on the underside of the Sarcosuchus, as well as a bit of a nice dark wash to highlight that detail. As you lead back up here into the side, you continue to see lots of variation to the scales, as well as again that nice satin shine that I was talking about. You can definitely see the light hitting it right there. As you lead down the course of the front leg, you've got some very nice muscle definition sculpted out, as well as a jagged edge there to the back of the leg as you lead down. As far as the scales go, you have kind of like ridges leading off of it. Leading down into the toes, they look great as well. The dark wash is definitely making all of that detail pop beautifully. You've also got the nails, which the nails also have the same similar look to them as the teeth, which helps them shine very realistically as well. I love that addition to the figure. The nails 100% look as legit as it gets, and they have a nice glossy look to them. As you move back up, you can again see the patterning as we move through with those really subtle dark browns. As we move up higher, we transition to blacks rather than dark browns. You also have that scoot-like appearance here moving along the back. Again, that kind of armored look to the back of our Sarcosuchus. You do have a slight turn in the body, as everything seems to be kind of leaning toward the right a little bit when it comes to the positioning of the body. A slight turn in the neck and even a slight tilt to the body as you move back. When you lead down here into the rear leg, you can see a larger appearance to the scale detail moving down through the thigh, down into the calf and everything. We continue to have that larger scale look, but it obviously decreases in size the closer we get down into the foot. We also have those sort of ridges moving along the back there of this leg, and then you lead down into the toes. The toes yet again look great. You have that dark wash absolutely making all of that scale detail pop, and again the same look there for the nails. They have a very genuine sharp look to them, and again that nice shine to the nails. As you lead out, there is a seam, but it's actually really hard to find it because you had, oh, that's right there, because you do have to connect the tail. The tail comes disconnected in the set, but look at how good that looks. Like, you really barely notice the seam. It's very noticeable on the underside. I wouldn't even say very noticeable, but definitely noticeable down here. But once you lead up into the side, it almost disappears completely. And then we lead out here. Again, you can see we have more of those nice yellowish brown tones down here. The tail, for the most part, is a good bit of the lighter tones rather than the darker tones. The darker tones kind of follow along the upper part of the Sarcosuchus tail. But here on the side, we basically have those darker tones just patterning through. And you can see like spots and stuff, but also this striping effect leading out as you continue to move through the tail. The majority of the tail here, again, is like that lighter yellowish brown transitioning to the lighter tone of the underside. underside, and again those darker variations of brown sort of striping through. It looks really neat, and you do have a wire tail out here, so you can kind of bend that very nicely just to give yourself a little extra posability with your Sarcosuchus. And again, the same style of scale detail here on the underside that you would expect to see moving through. And then you're going to see pretty close to the same thing. I almost dropped it. Pretty close to the same thing on the opposing side of this version of the Sarcosuchus, because there's not really going to be a whole lot of difference. It's not got any kind of like dramatic movement or difference on this side when it comes to the positioning of the body. You can see if you look from up above, both legs on each side are pretty much in the same spot. The only real big difference would be that slight turn to the neck and the slight turn to the body. But as you move through, you can continue to see, again, everything looks gorgeous as far as both the sculpt and paint job goes. I think the seam for the tail is a little more noticeable over here, but still by no means is that bad. But definitely a really nice looking Sarcosuchus. And we've also got our drowned Nurosaurus, and this as well sports a very nice sculpt overall. You can see that head sculpt looks really good. You can see some nice structure there to the neck, nice texturing and everything as you lead down. You've got some small ridges running along the spinal column, impressive skin texture as well. We basically just have like some brownish tones moving through the body, lighter tones for the underside, and you've got a striping here as you lead out into the tail with a dark gray. The entire figure has a very strong gloss coat to it because, again, it is a drowned Nurosaurus, so it's going to be wet. You can obviously see the areas where our Sarcosuchus has gotten a hold of this and has ripped the insides of her poor Nurosaurus open here. They do have a nice bloody look to it that, again, follows that very satin shine that we have going on. The legs obviously are limp here. These ones are sticking straight out, but the rear leg here is definitely limp and has fallen over, but I think that's because you want it to kind of sit in the mouth of the Sarcosuchus so it looks like it's now hanging. And then obviously if we take a look at the opposing side, you can continue to see how nice everything looks. You've got the eyes painted with a black. You also have the inside of the mouth painted out, which is nice to see. And then we also have the nails painted with a nice glossy black, but everything again has a kind of a gloss coat to it. There is also a dark wash to the Nurosaurus, adding a nice element of realism and also making the detail pop quite beautifully as well. And then you can see again as we lead back more of the injuries here to our Nurosaurus, which you can see we've got tooth marks and everything in there as you lead out through the length of the tail. And it is a little bit flexible, not super flexible, but definitely a little bit. And then we've got the alternate paint variant. Now this one just isn't as flashy as the first one, but still looks very nice and natural. You can see we've got kind of like grayish greens up here on the upper part of the body. As you lead down, we do lighten a little bit there along the jawline. And again, we kind of go back and forth here as you lead down into the lower jaw, again back to the darker tones, and then back to the lighter tones here as you lead to the underside. You can very clearly see again we've got that dark wash present just like we had on the first one, shining quite nicely as you lead there into the eye. You can see the eyes also have a nice paint job to them. They really stand out on this one, definitely shine quite nicely. We have an articulated jaw, of course, yet again, and you can see pretty similar when it comes to the paintwork of the inside of the mouth. It doesn't look too different to me, so for the most part, the inside of the mouth looks kind of close to the same. Again, super realistic looking teeth and everything as you move through. And then as you lead back into the body here a little bit, you can see a really nice transition down to the lighter tones of the underside. You again have that nice wash shining all of that detail beautifully out here on the sculpt. You've got all sorts of kind of like osteoderms or scoots or something here moving along the side, bumpier scales. And then again, the patterning up here is you have a black that just kind of moves through and just has like some small striping going on. Some black spots here on the side of our Sarcosuchus as you move down into the legs. Pretty much the same thing again with the black spots. The nails do look slightly different as far as the coloration goes. We still have that very realistic look to them, but I feel like they just look a little bit darker on this one compared to the first version. And we continue to have pretty much the same thing again with just like the grayish tones. It's like a grayish green. It's a very interesting tone of color. Actually, up here it looks a little more green than gray. But you can see again we've got the spots moving down and the nails again looking pretty much as they did on the front leg, that dark wash present. And then as you lead out, rather than a lighter tone of color running through the tail, we just continue to basically have that same tone that we've seen through the majority of the body leading out, except we still have again some more of those spots And again, the nice lighter tone here for the underside. Pretty much the same thing as you lead all the way out. You do have a light tone for the underside, but definitely a different light coloration compared to what we saw on the first version. And you can really see how nice that dark wash has brought all of the detail out on the underside of this one. And then again, it's going to be pretty much the same thing over here. No real big difference or anything. It's going to follow pretty much just like the other one did and have that same nice natural look, but same consistent look to what we saw on the first side. So even though this one isn't my favorite, it is still a very nice looking version of the Sarcosuchus. And then the Nurosaurus that comes with this one, you can see does look ever so slightly different compared to the first version, but follows the same kind of trend as far as the paint scheme goes, because again, we just have like this one solid tone of color for a large portion of the body with a dark wash applied, and then a striping effect as you lead out into the tail. And then rather than a lighter tone on this one, we basically, I mean, it is still kind of a lighter tone, but we have like an orangish brown for the underside of the Dinosaur here this time around. And you can see again pretty much the same thing as you move through. You've got the blood sort of splattered on there, the dark wash obviously shining through, and everything looks pretty much the same. And just to show you the difference between the two, this is the kind that comes with the reddish brown version. This is the more grayish green version. Pretty similar overall, just slightly different tones of color. As far as a size goes, if we go from the tail to the snout, you are looking at about 17¼ inches or around 44 centimeters. You're not really going to find much for a height because, of course, it's a Sarcosuchus, but you're looking at right around 2 inches or 5 centimeters. That might also be a little bit under that, but pretty close to that size range. And then for our Nurosaurus, you are looking at about 2 inches or 5 centimeters, pretty much the same as far as the height goes for our Sarcosuchus, but that's because it's not only laying down here, but it's also kind of curled in, so if it were stretched out, obviously it would be a bit longer. But for a size comparison, there is Mr. Papo T-Rex, the Attack Pack Colovosaurus, and Robert Muldoon from the Mattel Jurassic World toy line, as well as the Collect a Human Being in here next to our Sarcosuchus, which you can very clearly see. The Sarcosuchus is pretty big. Definitely has a very large size, very impressive size, similar in size to the Dinosuchus. We also have a Mattel Velociraptor and Dilophosaurus. I don't feel like we need too many comparisons this time around because it is so similar in size to the Dinosuchus, so we already probably have a pretty good idea of the size. If you already have the Rebor Dinosuchus, you're definitely going to know roughly what the size is of the Sarcosuchus, I think. But to find out for sure, we have the Rebor Dinosuchus and Sarcosuchus next to each other, and you can see pretty much as I expected, they're very similar in size. It looks like the Dinosuchus might be slightly larger than the Sarcosuchus, but not by much. They are pretty darn similar in size overall, so if you do already have the Dinosuchus, just know that the Sarcosuchus is pretty close to the same size range, maybe just slightly smaller in body mass and slightly shorter, but really not by much. So these brand new Rebor Sarcosuchus figures are both gorgeous, honestly, but this time I can definitely say for sure I have a favorite, because sometimes it's a little hard to choose between one or the other. This time I'm absolutely favoring the brownish version. I think the brown looks so good on this, so naturalistic, and it also has a nicer patterning. Like, there is a lot going on when it comes to the patterning as you move through, as well as a lot of variation of color added to it. It just generally, in my opinion, has a much nicer look to it as far as the coloration goes, but of course the sculpt is absolutely incredible. There is so much fine detail on this, so much very nice naturalistic detail. Now, as far as how accurate this is, I don't know for sure, as I'm no expert in the anatomy of a Sarcosuchus, but it looks pretty darn good to me. So if there's something that I'm unaware of, let me know in the comments section. I'd be intrigued to hear about it. But as far as the overall appearance goes, I think it looks as good as a Sarcosuchus can get. Again, absolutely incredible fine detail, absolutely incredible paint apps. There is also the alternate version, which has kind of like a grayish green coloration to it. A very interesting variation of a gray that we have for the figure. That one as well looks awesome as far as, looking like a real living Sarcosuchus. It 100% does. There's just a little less patterning and a little less variation of color to this one, but I think it looks very close to as nice as the brownish version, but equally as lifelike and realistic. And they've done such a good job of, transitioning colors, applying the dark wash and everything on both of them. but it just looks 100% alive if you ask me. We also have an articulated jaw on both of them, which is really fun, and you have a deceased Nurosaurus, a juvenile version that has drowned and become the prey of our Sarcosuchus, which is a really cool touch. I love the fact that every single time we get one of these crocodilian species, we always get some form of prey for the figure, and last time we only had a partial piece of a dinosaur. This time we at least have a full dinosaur, but it is very much so a dead, ripped up version of the Nurosaurus. But it is nicely sculpted. I would actually like to see Rebor release a living version of that species. But as a whole, both of these are incredible, and yet again, Rebor has knocked this release straight out of the park, which they have been doing consistently for quite a while now. So if you are interested in picking this up, I will include a link in the description to where I purchased mine on Big Bad Toy Store, so make sure you check that link. Absolutely grab one or both of these incredible Sarcosuchus, and also like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.